Hello everyone, and I hope you all are doing well and are safe at home. Welcome back to a new lecture and in this time on a new topic, that is refraction and dispersion of light through a prism. This is again part of the optics of the physics syllabus of class 12th of the ISC section. Before moving on to the chapter, let us first know what are the topics that we are going to cover in this entire chapter. There are majorly only three main topics. The first one is the prism formula. The second one is dispersion, angular dispersion and dispersive power, mostly of a prism and its applications, and scattering and its applications as well. You should be really relieved that today we are going to only cover the prism formula. So, before we start, we must first know what exactly a prism is, right? Well, I have a diagram over here to explain you what exactly is my prism. So, what do you see over here? You clearly see a homogeneous structure, right? Well, we also know that a homogeneous medium is that medium wherein the properties of the medium is uniform throughout its whole volume, right? So how can I define a prism? Well, a prism is certainly a homogeneous, but this time a transparent medium bounded by two plane surfaces that is inclined to each other. So basically, you can imagine that I have, let's say, a rectangular slab of glass and I have simply tapered both of its edges. Correct? So what happens? My roof goes away and all I'm simply left with is a base and the two tapering edges. Well, I'm sure this is also something like the roof of the house that you used to draw when you were a child, right? At least I used to. Anyway, coming back to the topic. So, as per this structure over here that I have of a prism, BEFC is going to be the base of the prism. Also, the surfaces ABED and ACFD, that is, these two tapering surfaces are also called as the refracting surfaces. Now, while I am at it, I would really like you all to note these things down in your notebooks. So just to recap, BEFC is going to be the base of the prism. Well, you can see that it's a rectangular surface, right? Also, ABED and ACFD are my refracting surfaces or the tapering surfaces. Now, why are they called refracting surfaces? Obviously, because I'm expecting my light to get incident on this prism from the ABED or from the ACFD surface. Okay. So what will you have here? Well, if I keep my prism in this orientation, because we already have seen three different orientations of the prism, right? In the last chapter, well, we had apparently dealt with something called as the right angled prism, correct? That was a 45, 90, 45 degree prism. Obviously, it is not necessary that you're going to get the same prism always, right? So, it is important for you to note down some terms, correct? Now, what do you think is the next that we would have on our plates? Well, obviously, it is going to be the angle of the prism. So over here, it is angle A, that is angle of the front surface over here, angle A, or let's say of the back surface, that is angle D. Both of these angles are called as the refracting angle, or also it is called as the angle of the prism. Now, it is really interesting to note that AD over here is the refracting edge. Okay. These are just some terms that are associated with the prism. That's it. Also, any section cut by a plane normally to the refracting edge is called as the principal section. Now what you do see over here is that ABC is the principal section, correct? So how do you visualize this? Well, simply imagine this prism to be that of an onion. Weird. But what if I have a knife and I want to chop this onion? So how do I do it? Correct? Absolutely. So I'm simply chopping my prism over here, but normal to that of the refracting edge AD. Yes? So let's say if I have chopped my prism right at this point, what do I get? I obviously get a triangle surface over here, correct? If I keep on chopping this prism like an onion, I'm obviously going to get numerable triangles, correct? So obviously, I understand that ABC is the principal section of my prism. Similarly, I can get many principal sections of this prism. PS, please do not try to cut glass with a kitchen knife at home. Spare yourself and your parents the horror. Also, since obviously this prism is in 3 dimension, let us now see a small animation of it. So now that you have seen a prism in 3 dimension, let us move ahead with refraction of light through a prism. Well, this topic is also called as the prism formula, and again is one of the most favorite questions of your board exams. Well, you actually only need to find out the refractive index of a prism. So let's get started. But hold on, before we get to the crux of our formula, we must first know what exactly happens in the prism. Well, like always, I do have a diagram for you all at our disposal. So, what do you see here? Well, A, B, C is the principal section of my prism. Yes, now I also know for a fact that this prism has two refracting surfaces, right? And what were those? Yes, the first one was the tapering surface AB and the second one was the other tapering surface, that is AC. So obviously, if my light is passing or rather trying to get through this prism, it encounters two different refracting surfaces, right? So obviously there is going to be two refractions taking place, correct? One at the refracting surface AB and the other at the refracting surface AC. Now let us see the specifications. Alright, so obviously ray PQ is going to be the incident ray, correct? What do you think should happen at the interface AB? Now the surface or the interface AB is the interface or the boundary that is separating the air and the glass prism, right? And since light is traveling from a rarer medium to a denser medium, what do you think happens? Well, by now you should have the answer at the tip of your tongue, right? So tell me. Yes, you're absolutely correct. It will obviously bend towards the normal, right? Now, how do I know this? Well, obviously, at this point of incidence, I'm going to draw my normal over here, correct? And because the light is traveling from a rarer medium to a denser medium, what happens? Well, it certainly suffers a refraction. The speed of the light slows down and the refracted ray now is going to move towards the normal, correct? What have I done over here? I've simply extended the incident ray forward, alright? Now, how and why are we going to use this? I'm going to tell you later. But majorly, let us see now what happens to the refracted ray. So, can you tell me which is going to be my refracted ray? Yes, ray QR is going to be the refracted ray, correct? Now, what will happen at, let's say, interface AC? Obviously, because now the light is trying to pass from the glass prism to air, it is going to bend again, right? But this time, no surprises. It is going to bend away from the normal, correct? Because it is traveling from a denser medium to a rarer medium, right? Thus, we clearly see that the ray RS over here is now the emergent ray. Why do I call it the emergent ray? Obviously, because this ray is emerging from the glass prism. That's it. Enough about rays. Let us now move on to the different angles that we are going to consider when it comes to the prism formula. Well, no prizes for guessing. Since I started with the incident ray PQ, obviously I want to find out the angle of incidence, correct? What do you think should be the angle of incidence at the first interface? Yes, obviously, it is going to be angle I over here, correct? So angle I is going to be the angle of incidence for the first interface, that is the air to glass interface, correct? Now what about R1 over here? I know this is not really visible to you, but soon this problem is going to be solved, okay? So what I also know for a fact is that R1 over here is my angle of refraction, where at the first interface, of course. Now what happens over here at the second interface, that is AC? Well, obviously R2 becomes my angle of incidence over here for the second interface, that is the glass to air interface, and angle E is going to be my angle of emergence this time. Alright, although you can call it the angle of refraction again, but then because we are only reserving in the derivation ahead the R's as the angle of refraction, you can say that E is the angle of emergence. Well, over here, there is something really interesting to note, and that is that not necessarily the angle of emergence E should be equal to the angle of incidence I. You recall where you have seen this? Yes, that was refraction of light through a rectangular slab, right? Remember studying this in class 10th? And also, remember I had just asked you a question about this on our WhatsApp group? Now over here, what do you think happens? Obviously, if assuming this 1 is my angle of incidence and this 3 is my angle of, let's say, emergence, I obviously know that the angle of incidence 1, or rather I over here, is equal to the angle of emergence E over here, right? So obviously we know for a fact that the emergent ray is parallel to the incident ray, correct? Yes. Now what can you tell me about the deviation of the emergent ray from the incident ray? You clearly told me that the answer was 0. That's absolutely right. In fact, what exactly is this deviation? Well, it is obviously how much difference is between the angle of incidence and, let's say, between the angle of emergence, correct? Well, certainly it is zilch over here, 0. But do you think the same is going to happen in a prism? I vote for no. Well, why? Obviously, because it has two different tapering surfaces and they are inclined to each other at a certain angle, correct? Remember, angle A being the angle of the prism? Yes. So over here, what exactly is going to be the angle of deviation? Well, the angle of deviation apparently is going to be the angle between the emergent ray RS and the direction of the incident ray PQ when I extend both RS and PQ. So obviously this angle is going to be my angle of deviation. Well, I am obviously not going to leave you like this over here. So we are going to go on to a larger diagram and look at how things are. Well, say hello to a larger diagram this time and a more clearer one too, right? Well, just a refresher for y'all. Ray PQ is the incident ray. I is the angle of incidence over here. R1 being the angle of refraction at point Q. QR is the refracted ray, R2 is the other angle of incidence on the interface AC at the point R, and angle E over here is the angle of emergence, correct? Now what do you think has happened to this initial or probably the incident ray PQ? Don't you think that it got deviated twice? Well, how did we come to know? Well, let me take it one by one, correct? So, suppose if I did not have the emergent ray, alright, RS, let me just probably extend ray QR ahead, and also at the same time extend ray PQ ahead as well, alright. So I'm extending both ray PQ and QR forward. Now what do I get? I obviously understand for a fact that if had there not been a prism here, ray PQ would have gone undeviated, correct? Can you see this dotted line over here? But now because there is a prism, there has been a deviation, correct? There has been a deviation of the ray PQ from its original path, and this is my first deviation. Let me call this as delta 1, alright. Now obviously this deviation is between the extended incident ray and the extended refracted ray, correct? But is this the only story? No. What do you now know for a fact that there is another ray which is RS, and that is the emergent ray, which means there is another deviation. And what is this deviation now? It is the deviation between the extended refracted ray and the emergent ray, correct? So obviously if this is going to be my second deviation, I am going to call it a delta 2. Alright. Now what do you exactly understand? Well, it is so obvious that if I extend back, or rather backwards, my emergent ray, can you see this dotted line over here? Yes. And if I extend forward my incident ray, why am I doing this? Well, obviously because my initial ray is PQ and the final ray is RS, right? And I obviously want to find out the total deviation that this ray PQ has suffered. So obviously I'm going to extend ray PQ ahead and extend ray RS behind. So the point at which both of them meet, the angle which these two extended rays form, is the actual angle of deviation, and this angle of deviation is nothing but delta. Now if you very clearly see from this diagram, you can obviously deduce the fact that delta is equal to delta 1 plus delta 2, correct? Why? Because this delta is the whole angle, right? The angle between, let's say, maybe any point O over here. So O, M, probably say S, yes, and that is equal to delta 1 over here, that is the first deviation, plus the delta 2 over here, which is the second deviation. Now because by no means I can find out delta 1 and delta 2, I simply only need to find out delta, right? So in my final diagram, I am not exactly going to make over here delta 1 and delta 2. It's just going to be a delta over here, alright? Also, I am pretty sure that such a hodgepodge diagram might be making you really crazy right now by even thinking about how exactly large is this derivation going to be, right? But you know what I want you to do? Yes, I want you all to keep calm because this derivation is extremely easy. So, as I always tell you, breathe and follow these 4 simple steps. The first one is to find the angle of deviation delta. The second one is to probably establish a relation between the angle of incidence I and the angle of deviation delta. The third step is to prove that the angle of incidence is equal to angle of emergence and that let's say R1 will be equal to R2, which will be equal to some value R, and to deduce the condition which involves all this. And the fourth one is going to be obviously to find out the angle of minimum deviation and then to find out the refractive index of the prism with respect to air. So with this, let's take a big deep breath and start. So we obviously first move on to our first step, that is finding out the angle of deviation. Well, as always, we have a diagram at our disposal. Now what you see over here is a very concise diagram of the original one, correct? So what do you have over here? You have a delta, that is the angle of deviation, and somehow magically you need to relate this delta to the angle of incidence I and the angle of emergence E, and even surprisingly the angle of the prism. How do you think you're going to do this? Can you imagine for me an inverted ice cream cone with an ice cream? Yes. So what do you think would happen? Well, I want you to visualize that AQNR is my ice cream cone with the ice cream, wherein AQR is obviously the ice cream cone and QNR is the ice cream. I'm sure I'm going to have an ice cream right after I complete this video. What about y'all? Shh, stay home, stay safe. All right then. Well, if you look at this delta over here, what do you feel? Don't you think so that this delta is apparently an exterior angle to the triangle MQR, right? Do you remember that there is a theorem called as the exterior angle theorem, wherein the exterior angle is equal to the sum of two remote interior angles, correct? Now, what do you think are the remote interior angles? Obviously, this is going to be the first remote interior angle and this is going to be the second remote interior angle, correct? Now, let us try to find out what exactly it is. Well, since I know that this is angle I, right? This whole angle is going to be I again, correct? Well, obviously, because this was my incident ray extended forward and this is my normal, correct? And obviously, angle of incidence is the angle between the incident ray and the normal. So obviously, between the incident ray and the normal. So what exactly do you think this angle will be? It is going to be this I minus this angle, right? This is R1. Yes. So I get my first angle, that is I minus R1, correct? And what do you think will this angle be? So let's try again. If this is angle E, again, this is going to be E, right? Vertically opposite. Yes. So what is this angle going to be? It will be the whole angle E minus R2, correct? Well, now that I have written down the values of both these remote interior angles, what do you think delta will be? Obviously, it is going to be the addition of I minus R1 and E minus R2. As you can clearly see in this equation that I call as star 1. Alright. Well, obviously because of the exterior angle theorem. Now, rather than writing this as probably I minus R1 and E minus R2, can I write it somehow taking I and E on one side and R1s and R2s on the other side? Well, certainly yes. So what happens over here? E comes to this side and because there's a plus sign associated with E, so obviously it is going to be I plus E. And what do you get in return? you get a minus r1 and a minus r2 that's left, correct? I can obviously take both the minus signs common, take it outside, that is outside the bracket, and simply write r1 plus r2 in the bracket, correct? Well, this only makes sense. Because remember, somewhere down the line in step number 3, I want to equate r1 and r2. Yes. So when you write this equation down in your notebooks, I really want you to put a star mark against it, because this equation is the crux of our derivation, and in the final step you will have to come back to this. Alright? Okay. Well, let us now consider the ice cream with the ice cream cone. That is my quadrilateral AQNR. Okay. So how are we going to go about this derivation? First, we'll be considering the larger sided polygon, that is AQNR, or in, let's say, layman's language, the ice cream with the ice cream cone. And in the next step, we are going to go with the three-sided polygon, alright, or the ice cream here. Well, what do you see in this quadrilateral? Certainly that angle AQN and angle ARN, both of them are right angles. Why? Well, obviously because these two are the normals that have been drawn to both these sides, right? So if this angle is going to be 90, this angle is also 90, correct? Which gives you the fact that angle Q and obviously angle R, because this is also normal, are going to be 90. What does that make up of angle A and angle N? Do you remember that the sum of all the angles of a quadrilateral is 360? Yes. So if I eliminate, or rather, because I am certain that one angle is 90 and the other is 90, that makes up the sum of two angles as 180, which certainly makes up for the fact that the angle A plus angle N should be equal to 180, right? Because it's going to be angle A plus angle Q plus angle N plus angle R being 360. So it should be A plus N plus 180 as 360, and obviously you have to minus 360 or other 180 from 360, which gives you the fact that angle A plus angle N is going to be 180 degrees. I am marking this as equation 2, and with this fact I am moving on to only the ice cream, that is the triangle QNR. Now what do you see from the triangle QNR? Well, again, don't you think so that the sum of all the angles of a triangle is 180 degree? Yes. Also, what do you get over here then? Well, obviously, you get that R1 plus R2 plus angle N should be equal to 180, correct? That gives me my equation number 3. But you know what? If you look at equations 2 and equation 3 very closely, what do you see here? You see similar terms, right? N 180, N 180, which obviously means that A and R1 plus R2 are somehow related. How do you think so? Well, obviously, both of them are going to be equal, right? Because I can simply write this as x plus n is 180 and x plus n is 180. So obviously both of these have to be x, correct? So I can safely say that R1 plus R2 is equal to A. Isn't it obvious? And what do you get if you put this equation number 4 in equation number 1? Do you see an R1 and R2 here? Obviously, I can simply write that delta is equal to I plus E minus A, because A is R1 plus R2, and I'm simply substituting the value of R1 plus R2 as A over here. and with this I'm marking this equation as star 2. Well, be happy because this also marks the end of our goal of step 1, right? That is finding the angle of deviation. Let us now move on to our next step, that is to establish a relation between the angle of deviation delta and the angle of incidence of light on a prism I. Alright. Now before I move on to this, remember I had shared 2 videos with you as a prerequisite to this video. Well, if you remember in the second video, what did they do? They simply changed or varied the angle of incidence to the prism and measured the angle of deviation with respect to I, right? And what did they find? Well, they found that with respect to angle of incidence I, the angle of deviation delta certainly changed. And when they plotted all their observations, this is the graph that they found out. And what was the inference of this graph? Well, clearly they found out that as the angle of incidence, alright, now of course this graph is of the angle of deviation delta versus the angle of incidence I, correct? So let us try to see what did they find. They certainly found out that as we kept on increasing the angle of incidence, the angle of deviation decreased. Oh my god. But it reached a point. What reached a point? Obviously the angle of deviation. Yes. So the angle of deviation reaches a certain minimum. And again, when you keep on increasing the angle of incidence, it starts to increase again. So what do you see? You see a nice and beautiful curve, right? Now it is really interesting to note that at the minimum point of this curve or at the minimum point of this graph, maybe the angle of incidence is equal to that of the angle of emergence. Alright. So obviously when I is equal to E, my delta becomes delta minimum, or I can even call this as delta M, which means that now my angle of deviation is my angle of minimum deviation. What do you think is the significance of this? Well, obviously at this and this angle of incidence alone, my light is going to be deviated the least, right? Well, obviously because my angle of incidence is equal to the angle of emergence. Do you remember when was the last time this happened? When the angle of incidence was equal to the angle of emergence? That was in a rectangular slab, right? And at that time we clearly found out that delta was 0. But this time, because delta depends on I, E and even A, thus delta cannot be 0 here. There has to be a certain minimum deviation, and this is the minimum deviation that we are about to find out in the 4th step. Which leads me to the fact that how did you even understand that I is equal to E? And also, what about R1 and R2 then? Are they somehow related to each other when I is equal to E? Well, let us now prove all our points. But before we move on, I want you to really understand that on this curve, there will be 2 different angles of incidences for one particular value of deviation, or rather of one particular value of angle of deviation. So if probably I extend, let's say maybe if I want to find out that what are the corresponding angle of incidences that I can have when my light is deviated by 50 degrees, I simply have to draw a line which is probably perpendicular to 50, correct? And thus mark down those 2 perpendiculars down to the x-axis from the point of intersection of this line at the curve, right? Well, this brings me to a conclusion that for every single point of this curve except for one, every angle of deviation will have two corresponding angle of incidence, right? So more on this later. So let us now move ahead to our third step, that is to prove that I is equal to E and that when I is equal to E, R1 is equal to R2 is equal to, let's say, any R. And as always, I will obviously have the diagram back again. So let us first prove that I is equal to E. And how do I do this? Well, I know for a fact that for the initial path of the ray P, Q, R and S, I have I as the angle of incidence and E over here as the angle of emergence, right? And at, let's say, that particular value I, wherein my delta is delta minimum. All right. So what am I doing? I am simply locking for a fact that for this value I over here, I get my delta to be that of delta minimum. So I'm getting minimum deviation of my initial incident ray at this particular angle I. All right. Now, do you remember we have even studied the principle of reversibility of the light? Yes. So, if I reverse the light now, that is, if I simply reverse the original path of the ray, now the ray is not traveling as PQRS, now the ray is traveling as S, R, Q and P. So this time what do I get? Well, I get for a fact that E, please note this down really, E is now the angle of incidence and I becomes my angle of emergence. Now tell me one thing, did I by any chance change the ray? No, I simply reversed its path, right? Which obviously means for a fact that I should still get this deviation to be that of delta minimum, correct? Which brings me to the fact that for angle of incidence E, I am getting delta as delta minimum again. Now, do you think this is even possible? I know for a fact that delta is going to be delta minimum at only one and one angle of incidence I, right? Which obviously means that this angle E has to be I, only and only then delta will be delta minimum, correct? So this brings me to my another equation, that is I is equal to E, and I'm simply marking this equation down as star 4. Now since we have already proved that I is equal to E, I would want you all to have a look at the previous graph again. But before that, you must really understand the fact that it is reversibility of light that empowers me to find out two corresponding angle of incidences for one particular angle of deviation. I am not talking about the angle of minimum deviation here, guys. I am simply talking about the angle of deviation now. So let's say for any particular angle of deviation, maybe 50 degrees as we pointed out in the graph previously, if at once I have I as my angle of incidence and E as my angle of, let's say, emergence, if I use the principle of reversibility of light, I will now get E as the angle of incidence and I as the angle of emergence corresponding to that particular value of delta alone, right? As you clearly saw over here. So for, let's say, maybe PQRS, I get this as my angle of incidence and this as my angle of emergence, and both of them are going to correspond to one single value of the angle of deviation and not minimum deviation here. Alright. Now since you have understood this property of reversibility of light, let us now move on to find out whether R1 is equal to R2 or not. So for finding out whether R1 is equal to R2, we are going to use the principle of reversibility of light again, albeit with a little twist. Let's see what it is. So for the ray PQRS, now at the interface AB, if N is the refractive index of the prism with respect to air, can I find out the refractive index of this prism according to Snell's law? Well, obviously yes, because Snell's law told me that N is equal to sine I upon sine R. But what is R over here? Certainly it is R1, right? So obviously N for this ray, that is PQRS, it is going to be equal to sine I upon sine R1. Now what if the path of the ray is reversed? That is, now the ray is traveling from SRQP. I can still find out the refractive index of the prism with respect to air? Well, obviously yes, but over here this time E becomes my angle of incidence and R2 becomes my angle of refraction, right? So what do you get? Well, according to Snell's law, N will be equal to sine E this time upon sine R2. I'm naming this equation as small Roman number 2. Now can I compare these two equations? I obviously see that their LHS are equal, correct? So obviously you get the fact that N is equal to sine I upon sine R1, which is equal to sine E upon sine R2, right? Now this is strictly and strictly for when I is equal to E, then what happens? Well, obviously, if I is equal to E, sine I will be equal to sine E, right? Now, obviously, when two of my numerators are equal, the denominators have to be equal too, which brings me to the fact that sine R1 has to be equal to sine R2, and sine R1 is going to be equal to sine R2 only and only when R1 will be equal to R2. So I prove it again. I now name this equation as star phi, which brings me to the fact that R1 is equal to R2 and we have equated it to probably any variable R. Well, hold on. We still have our last part of this derivation left. Keep your seatbelts tightened because we have now reached the climax of our movie. We are simply going to integrate all the different stars that we probably just found out into one equation and then simply find out the refractive index of this cute little prism that we have been carrying along all throughout these last 40 minutes. Oh my god, how do you even bear me sometimes, I wonder. So now, the moment that you all have been waiting for, that is to find out the angle of minimum deviation, that is delta M, and lastly to find out the refractive index of this prism. This is going to be our prism formula. Let's try to find out. Oh prism, when are you going to leave me? So we just now studied that delta is going to be delta m when I will be equal to E and when R1 will be equal to R2, right? Now suppose if angle B and angle C, that is the base angles of this prism, if both these angles will be equal, what are you going to tell me about the ray QR? Can you understand for the fact that if B and C are equal, Q and R will be equal too, right? Well, how? Certainly because we know for a fact that this angle was I minus R1, this angle was E minus R2, correct? And if I is equal to E and R1 is equal to R2, this angle is going to be same as this angle, correct? Which brings me to the fact that this small little angle over here is going to be 90 minus I, and this angle is going to be 90 minus I again because I is equal to E. So obviously this angle, that is ARQ, will be equal to AQR. Now if B and C are equal, it is obviously worth noting that triangle AQR is going to be similar to that of triangle A, B and C. And this is going to happen only and only when delta is delta minimum, right? Well, this brings us to the fact that if these two triangles are similar, that is AQR and ABC are similar, obviously QR has to be completely parallel to the ray BC, correct? This in fact is another inference that I would really want you to note down. Condition being that angle B and angle C have to be equal. Only and only then QR is going to be parallel to the base BC. So now that we know for the fact that when delta is equal to delta M, I is equal to E and R1 is equal to R2 is equal to R, let us now try to find out delta M, right? So for that we have from equation 4 and star 5. Well, I am sure that you have not kept a count of those equations, and that's the only reason I have my equation 4 and equation star 5 over here right in front of you. What would you get? Obviously, you can clearly infer that if R1 is equal to R2 as R and R1 plus R2 is equal to A, you get R plus R is equal to A, right? Which gives you that 2R is equal to A. But do you know for finding out the refractive index, you need to find out R? So what do you think R would be? Certainly it is going to be A by 2. Now why am I taking R over here? Because remember in Snell's law, I could find out the refractive index of this prism by equating it to sin I upon sin R1. But this time it is not R1, it is R, as we have already proved, right? Well, moving on to how exactly you're going to find out the angle of incidence I. Well, we simply have to locate I in one of the previous equations that contained it. Scratch your heads. Do you remember any equation? Well, yes, certainly. Was that not the equation for finding the angle of deviation? The first step of our derivation. So, but over here this time we have to put delta as delta M, I as E, right? So let's try to see what exactly this gives us. Now, from equation star 2, star 3 and star 4, we have, remember this was star 2, delta was equal to I plus E minus A, and star 3 was delta being delta minimum. So we simply have to substitute delta as delta minimum. And what was star 3 or other star 4? It was I is equal to E, right? So by simply putting both of these equations, the star 4 and the star 3, in my equation star 2, I get delta is equal to I plus I minus A. That is, delta is equal to, or rather delta M is equal to 2I minus A, correct? Well, half of my climax is already done. That is, I've already found out the angle of minimum deviation delta M. Now, because I want to find out the refractive index of the medium, I will obviously have to find out I, right? And how do I do that? I simply take A on the LHS. What do I get? A plus delta M is equal to 2I, which brings me to the fact that I will be equal to A plus delta M by 2. Correct? Now I've got an I, I've got an R. I simply need to find out the refractive index of the prism, correct? And it is going to be N is equal to, of course, sine I upon sine R. You now have to only substitute the values of I and R in this equation, and behold, here is the grand formula for which we have simply spent the last 15 minutes on. That is, N is equal to sine of A plus delta M by 2 upon the sine of A by 2. This formula is also called as the prism formula. And generally, your board exams may ask this question to you for 3 or maybe even 5 marks. Now that you are done with this derivation, you can simply release that breath that you had been holding for so long. And let us now look at one small condition, that is deviation by a thin prism. Now what exactly is a thin prism? Well, suppose if the refracting angle A of the prism is very small, that is, it is lesser than or equal to a 5 degree, the prism is called as a thin prism. Well, we can obviously use an approximation then. That is, sine theta is equal to theta. Now this approximation works when theta is very small and measured in radian. Apparently 5 degrees when it is measured in radian is very small. It approaches 0. And sine of that theta also approaches 0. That is the only reason we use this approximation. Also, we know for a fact that delta M depended on A, right? So if A will be small, delta M will be small too, correct? Thus, using this approximation of sine theta being theta, we can simply write sine of A plus delta M by 2 as A plus delta M by 2, and rather than writing sine A by 2, we can simply write that as A by 2. Do you recollect which formula am I trying to put you to? Absolutely, that is the formula of finding the refractive index of the prism, right? So, I can simply write n as A plus delta M by 2 upon A by 2. Now what do you get here? Obviously, 2 and 2 gets cancelled. You get n is equal to A plus delta M upon A. You can take A on the other side. You'll be getting NA is equal to A plus delta M. Correct? Now, if I want to find out the deviation by a thin prism, I am certainly looking at trying to find out this delta M, correct? So obviously I would want delta M on one side and everything else on the other. Remember what was over here? NA. So it's going to be NA minus A is equal to delta M. Well, I can simply take the A common from NA and A. and I get my final formula as delta M is equal to n minus 1 of A. Remember, this was Na minus A. I simply took the A outside, correct? So, we are now officially done with today's lecture. Let me go grab a bite of that ice cream. Bye-bye. See you all for the next time. Remember, stay at home and stay safe.